Hello everybody and welcome to By His Grace Fishing. If this is your first time here, please subscribe below, hit that notification bell, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Today is more of an educational video. I've been asked a couple questions on how I attach the leader line to my micro braid, along with some of the knots that I use. So in this video, I'm going to show you the knots that I tie on a daily basis, including the way that I tie my leader line to my micro braid. I'm going to show you how to tie these knots, why I use these knots, and where I use these knots. And I'll also throw in a little tip on how to cast some of these smallest micro baits just a little bit further. So stick around and enjoy the video.
Alright, this first knot that we're going to do here, I believe the name of this knot is called the improved clinch knot. This is the first knot that I was ever taught to tie as a kid. I believe it is called the improved clinch knot. My dad always called it the fisherman's knot, so that's what I always called it. But we're going to start out with our monofilament or our fluorocarbon, and we're going to take and we're going to run our tag end through the eye of the hook, just like that right there, and we're going to pull plenty of tag end out. What we're going to do is, some people will spin the line. For me, it's easier to just spin the hook. I will spin the hook 3 or 4 times, and it puts a twist in the line right here. And what I will do is take that tag end here, and what we are left with is a loop right here, right above the eye of that hook. And I will run that tag end through that loop, and that provides us a secondary loop right here, which is this right here. And I'm going to run this tag end right back through there and pull this knot up, and then we can start cinching it down. Now if you wet this line right here, it will pull pretty tight. I've never had this knot to slip, and it makes a good just standard quick easy knot to tie. And you can just take your scissors and snip that line off about a 1/4 to 1/8 inch right past that knot right there. And that knot is a quick, easy knot. Works plenty good for most of your panfish, your bluegill and stuff like that. I do not use this knot with the micro braid though. I have found out that if you tie this knot with a micro braid, sometimes upon even just cinching the knot down, it will slip and release. So I don't recommend tying that knot right there if you're using braided fishing line. Alright, this next knot here, this knot right here I use if I'm fishing in creeks and I know this knot has a higher tendency to be rubbing on rocks, or if I'm using micro line and I have a chance of catching some fish, bass, fish like that with a bigger tooth patch that's going to apply more pressure and more just more rubbing on that knot. And this is also the knot that I use when I am tying a jig head to my micro braided fishing line, and I've never had a problem with this knot slipping. But this is going to be the Palomar knot, and what we're going to do is we're going to start by folding our line over here and giving ourselves plenty of tag end, and we're going to pinch this little loop right here pretty flat, and depending upon the size of your jig head, that'll determine how much you have to actually pinch this right here down to get it through that jig head. But we're going to start by taking and running this loop right here through the eye of our hook and giving ourselves plenty of tag end here. And we're going to make a overhand loop here, or overhand knot, and we're going to pull this folded over tag end here right back through this loop. So our knot should look like this right here. Now once we get that loop pulled back through itself, we're going to take the hook and thread it through the center of that loop, and then we're going to slowly start cinching this knot down. And I do prefer wetting this knot right here, but it's not going to help a whole lot on this paracord here that we're using to show this knot. But just cinch that knot down right there, and that right there gives you a good durable knot. I have never had that knot right there to slip on me, and when pulled tight, it's a good durable knot, and it actually doubles the line right here around the eye of the hook. So those fish that have a tooth patch that's a little more aggressive, this knot right here to me holds up a lot better. And it's also my preferred knot for using the micro fishing braids and braided fishing line just in general. And then you can take your scissors or your knife and just cut this tag end right here off about 1/4 inch to an 1/8 inch from that knot right there. And that gives you a good, pretty quick, durable knot right there that you can use pretty much most of the time. Alright, this next knot here is a knot, and I use this knot right here mainly for crappie fishing, and I use it when I'm using a jig head and a soft plastic. And I have found out that this knot right here does give me a higher hookup rate, especially on fish that are striking pretty quickly. It allows the jig head to have a little more movement and to work into the corner of the mouth a lot better. And if crappie hits it at an odd angle, it allows that jig head to spin a little bit to get a little bit better hook. But the way we're going to tie this knot right here is we're going to take and we're going to start with our tag end here and run it through the eye of the hook and pull out plenty of tag end here and just pull it back on itself, so we end up with a knot that starts out like this right here. We're going to take this right here and we're going to start making a loop just like this right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that hook there and we're going to pass it through this loop 1, 2 times. Now I've seen people that pass it through 3 and 4 times. To me, 2 times has always worked for me, and I've never had a problem with it slipping. And depending upon how much you leave hanging down right here will determine the size of your loop. You can adjust it by pulling your line back up or lowering it even more. But we'll start cinching that knot down right there and pull it good and tight. And what it leaves us with here is a loop right here around our hook that allows this jig head to have more range of movement right here. And like I said, it has helped me a lot as far as when the crappie are striking quickly or at odd angles. I have found that I get a lot better hook up there. And then you can just come back with these other knots and take your scissors or your knife and cut this line off your tag end here about 1/4 to 1/8 inch outside of that knot right there. But this knot right here works extremely well for crappie, but it is about the only time that I do use this knot right here. Alright, this next knot here is not a knot for tying on a jig head or anything like that. I've had a couple questions about how I tie my braided line, how I tie a leader to my braided line. And since I use a lot of 4-pound braid, I tend to use a leader most of the time, especially if I'm in a creek or if I have a high probability or a higher chance of catching a fish with a bigger tooth patch, like catfish or bass, something like that, that has a tooth patch that will abrade away that 4-pound braid. 4-pound braided line will get in a 10 or 15-pound fish. I know it can because I've done it. But if you have a tooth patch on that fish, he can wear through that 4-pound line pretty rapidly. So I always try to use a fluorocarbon or a monofilament leader on there. But the way we're going to start here is we're going to use this orange line right here. This is going to be the line coming from our fishing reel. And we're going to use the white line right here. This is going to be our leader line. So I'm going to take and pull these 2 lines parallel to one another right here. And once you tie this knot a couple times, you can tie it pretty quick. And you don't have to lay it out on a table like this. You can just tie it in your hands. And this knot will actually look big on this line. But I'll try to tie one here with some fluorocarbon to show you that this is actually a pretty low profile knot. And I believe it is called the double uni knot. But we're going to start by taking our tag end right here from our braided line, and we're going to pull it out, and we're going to bring it back on itself just like this right here. So this is what our lines look like right here. We're going to make a loop right here just like this right here, And we're going to take this tag end and we're going to bring it through this loop that we've made a minimum of about 3 times. I like to go 4 or 5 sometimes, depending upon the diameter of the lines that I'm attaching. So we've got it pulled through there about 4 times, and I'm going to just pull this tag end and start cinching this knot down right here. I'm not going to pull it all the way tight, but we're going to start cinching it down there. And this is kind of what we have going on here, is that right there. We're going to take the tag end over here on our fluorocarbon or our monofilament leader here. We're going to do the same thing with it. We're going to make a loop, and we're going to bring this line back through this loop right here about 3 to 4 times minimum. And we're going to do the same thing with it. We're going to start cinching that knot down on itself. So what we've got here is we've really got 2 independent knots right here. And if we take our braided line here and we take our leader line here and we pull, it's going to pull these 2 knots together. And then we can grab our 2 tag ends and kind of cinch them down pretty tight here. And then just give this one more tug right here, and it will cinch that knot together nice and tight. And once we get it nice and tight there, you can take a pair of scissors and you can cut, or your knife, and you can cut these tag ends off also, just like this right here. Should have got some sharper scissors here. And there you go. And I have never had a problem with this knot right here pulling loose on me. Right there. And now that right there looks like it's a pretty big knot. And that's because we're using this paracord here just for visual reference. But let me see. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but I will tie this knot right here. I will tie this knot with some fluorocarbon leader here. This is a 6-pound leader, and you are definitely not going to be able to see it. Alright, now I know that that knot probably looked like a big knot that we tied there with that paracord. I don't know if I can ever get this camera to zoom in here, but this knot is actually a very low profile knot. This right here is that same knot tied with 6-pound. This is a fluorocarbon leader line, and this is that exact same knot right here cinched down and tied. All you can see is just a small little old dot right here in that line, and that right there is the exact same double uni knot right there that we tied. So it's a pretty small knot. Like I said, I've never had a problem with it, and I can reel this knot. If I'm fishing a creek, sometimes I'll put sometimes a 4 or 5 foot leader line on, especially if I know if I'm going to be snapping the line off on some, some snags and stuff. I may put a, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 foot leader line on there, and I can reel that knot all the way up into my eyes and cast it out and never have a problem. And sometimes you can hear just a very faint clicking sound on some of these videos when I'm casting, and that is actually that knot coming through the eyes. It just makes a little bit of a sound, but it does not affect the casting distance or the accuracy of that knot. I'm having a hard time even picking it up there off that piece of paper there, but it is a very good knot, and that is the knot that I use to attach my leader lines to my braided line. And that gets me to another question that I have been asked. A lot of the jig heads that I use are these very small, let me get one out here, is the 1/200th of an ounce. This is the Trout Magnet Mini Magnet jig head. I use this jig head a lot right here for a lot of the micro baits. And it is very small compared to a regular trout magnet jig head. This is your standard trout magnet jig head, and this one right here is the mini trout magnet jig head. And I get a lot of people asking how I cast those small jig heads out. And the same is with this this little Bobby Garland jig head here is another one. This is the Itty Bit jig head. I use a lot of them also, along the lines with several other jig heads. No matter what you do, this little jig head right here can be difficult to throw out, especially if you don't have a weighted float or anything like that. This jig head right here, I mainly will throw it with 2-pound monofilament line, and I use a lot of the Trout Magnet SOS line, but I throw that jig head primarily with that line on an ultralight pole. Sometimes if I need just a touch more distance, one trick that I do, and I do this a lot, even casting some of the other jig heads. If I'm using 2-pound line and I need just a little bit more distance, or if I'm using braid, 4-pound braid, and I need a little more distance, I will use that 6-pound fluorocarbon leader. And I know a lot of people think that's kind of odd, using a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader on a 2-pound line. Yes, if you get tangled up, the main line is going to snap before the leader does. But what I have found out is that leader line, especially around 6-pound leader line, if I attach it to my 4-pound braid, or if I attach it to that 2-pound SOS line, the fluorocarbon line is a fair amount heavier and it is more dense. One, because it's just a heavier line naturally. Plus the fluorocarbon is heavier. It's heavier than the monofilament, the 2-pound monofilament, or the braided line. So I will sometimes put a leader, even if I'm using 2-pound line. If I'm throwing this 1/200th of an ounce jig head, I will tie me about a 1-foot section of 6-pound fluorocarbon leader, and it kind of works like similar to fly fishing. Some of the lines have weight forward, which means that there's more weight towards the end of that line than there is back towards the reel. So when you throw, you get that inertia and you get that speed going, and that fluorocarbon leader along with this jig head can actually help that cast to go just a little bit further. Sometimes it's just a mere 1 feet. Sometimes it can make a difference of 5 or 6 feet, depending upon the lure and the type of bait that you've got on here. And sometimes that's all it takes, is that little bit of leader line to get out there. And I know it's difficult for some people to tie a leader like that every time, especially if you're getting tangled up a lot and you're snapping your line off a lot on some snags. But if you do need just a little bit more distance casting these small jig heads like this, and you're using 4-pound braid or 2-pound monofilament like I use a lot of, if you can tie a 1-foot section of about a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader line, it will actually put just a little bit more weight forward and help you get just a little bit further cast. But we're going to be testing out some poles here in the future, some budget-friendly poles, and we're going to find the best pole that we can find on a budget to cast these small 1/200th of an ounce jig heads with some small microplastics. And we'll test out a few. I've got one in the truck. As soon as we get a chance to try it out, we're going to try it out, and it's a $25 fishing pole. It may not be no good, but we're going to give it a try. But I want to thank everybody for watching and supporting this channel. I hope that you got something out of this video. I just wanted to clear up some of these knots, especially my leader line to my braided line. I've been getting some questions about it. but just practice some of these knots and give them a try. But these are the ones that I have found that just work best for me for the fishing that I do. But I want to thank everybody for watching and supporting this channel. God bless, and have a good day.